verse 24. And by the way, I want you to see it says in all those first ones, it said, and God said, and God said, and God said. That's a Hebrew construction that basically says, and then, and then, and then. It's a consecutive. It means this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But the translators in verse 26 change it. And it says, then God said. And the reason it says then is that the Hebrew uses a slightly different word because it says we want to pause here. It's not saying it doesn't happen in this order, but it's saying something different here. There's going to be a speech. Then God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air, or the heavens, and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Verse 27 is the first poetry. First poetry we find in the Bible. And is the poetry of God speaking, some suggest singing, man into being. Now, what makes this so significant to us is that we go to the New Testament, where in the New Testament we find the Old Testament revealed in its fullness. We find what the Old Testament sometimes hints at is explained clearly, and in John 1:1 it says, in the beginning was the Word. What do words do? Well, they speak to us. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life. The life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This spoken word is Jesus. You ever considered the parallelism? Jesus, it says, and God said, and this whole universe comes into being, and it's beautiful, and it's mature, and it's complete. It's interesting, in John's gospel, he introduces Jesus as the Word. What's his first miracle in John? John chapter 2, the water turned into wine. How was that miracle accomplished? By a word. What's created? Wine. How many jars? 6. How many days of creation? 6. Oh, and by the way, I know you're Baptist, so you probably don't know this. How is good wine made? It is aged. What did the host of the feast say about that wine? Everybody usually serves the good stuff first and saves the bad stuff till later. This is the best. So, creation by a word with apparent age. I wonder who Jesus is. The Son of God. The power behind creation. It's emphasized again in Colossians chapter 1. It's not just John telling the story. It is Paul establishing doctrine, where in Colossians chapter 1 he tells us about this wonderful Jesus, beginning in verse 13. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him, verse 16, all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones, dominions, rulers, or authorities. If you were here in Ephesians, you know that spiritual powers. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Hebrews chapter 1, that wonderful writer speaking to Jewish believers who are struggling in their faith and wondering, do we hold on? Do we believe in the face of persecution, or do we go back to the old ways? We are told of Jesus in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2. In these last days, God has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and is the exact imprint of his nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. The power behind creation is the spoken word. The power behind creation is the revealed will. Do you catch another repeated phrase In the King James, onward, it has been translated in most of our English versions, let there be. Look back at Genesis chapter 1. God said, let there be light. Verse 6, let there be an expanse. Verse 9, let the waters under heaven be. Verse 11, let the earth sprout. Verse 14, let there be lights. Over and over again, let there be. That is not a command. This is not God standing over things and saying, I command. It's like you looking at a menu at Chili's saying, I'd like this. You're not commanding, you're simply saying. This is not imperative, it's simply indicative. This is what I want. And now I want this. And I want this. And it was so. Everything God did, in fact, the scripture says everything God does and continues to do is all according to his plan. He has a plan. People look at our universe, our world, and they say, oh, how can you believe God has a plan? Did God have a plan for an 8.9 earthquake in Japan that would move the main island 8 feet, send a 30-foot wall of water in, and wipe out a village that was twice the size of Cedarville, where every single person has vanished? What kind of God is that? The same God who keeps this earth from shaking continually, causing all of us every single day to be wondering why the earth is moving and why we can't build and why we can't live. So many will say, where is God when we see a tragedy like this? And we never stop to thank him every single day when such a tragedy does not befall or something worse comes. God's plan in creation has not been thwarted by the fall. That is his plan. God's plan will carry us through to the wonderful redemption. And people, and I know this is going to come up, especially when we get to Genesis 3, people will say, how could God allow for this? Well, we'll talk more about it in Genesis 3, but let me just simply say this. To critique and pass judgment upon God through your understanding of his plan is flawed at 2 points. Number one, you are locked in time. You can only look at things right now. You cannot see the end from the beginning. When you can do that, then you can critique. And you are locked in circumstance. You are looking at what is going on, not just in this moment of time, but by what you can see, what you have learned, what you have understood. Job began to ask questions of God based on what he understood. You remember what happened? God came and his first question was, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? For you to critique, or me to critique, God's plan would be like for me to take you into a theater and show you 1.5 seconds of the movie Inception and then have you tell me the story. Well, it's obvious. This is a documentary on spinning tops. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's not. And for those of you who have seen it, I know you probably still haven't figured it out. But can you judge a movie, a story, by 1.5 seconds? That's probably being generous in terms of the amount of time, because that's, 2.5 hour movie, 1.5 seconds. Maybe let's give you a 0.5 second. There. Tell me all about it. Tell me the meaning. Our God, as I said, is in heaven. He does as he pleases. And as he looked at his plan, he could say it was good. We see amazing creativity and design. God did not have to make color. Do you know he could have made this world black and white? He could have made this world with 2 kinds of fish. He could have made it with 3 creatures. He could have made it any number of ways, but you know, you learn something about an artist by considering his or her art. That's not by accident. God, the original creative artist, invested this world with such beauty that unless your soul is dead, it can still take your breath away. And he did that so that we would see him. And what authority. What authority. He could speak, and it was so. He could speak, and it was so. The only place where that changes is in his creation of angels and of humans. For as he created angels and humans, what did he give them? Choice. Choice. But all the rest of creation, as it came into being, came perfectly. Which leads us to the third consideration, the goodness of creation. In almost any other case, we would probably wonder about an artist who is holding up his art and saying, "Isn't it great? Don't you love what I've done with..." But with God, perfect, no brag, just fact, he could look as things were made and say, "It's good. It's good. It's good." The heavens, the earth, all their host, he says, it's good. Now, again, this isn't a direct refutation of evolution, but do you think that if this was a world experiencing decay and death, it would be quite as good? Death, we know, is a judgment for sin. That's said over and over and over and over and over again. The first death that is recorded for us is the death of animals to provide skins for covering for man. I would also suggest, and again, I can't be hard and fast on this because he's talking about the earth, not necessarily the heavens and the earth, although they're included when we get to chapter 2. So this is why I lean this way. I tend to think Satan hasn't fallen yet. I tend to think that the whole universe is absolutely perfect, and God is looking at it at the very end, and he comes to the statement, verse 31, God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. It was very good. God could look at it. And in saying it's good, it's beautiful, it's complete. There's nothing else he's looking at saying, oh, it's missing. Oh, it's missing. No, it's there, which leads us to the rest of creation. I don't mean the rest in terms of the continuing. I mean the rest like God rested. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. The heavens and earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation.